On the morning of the 27th of May, 2015, guests at the Baur Hotel in Zurich were finishing their breakfasts when Swiss police moved quietly through the lobby. They took the elevator to the upper floors. They knocked on doors. Within minutes, 7 men in suits were being led outside in handcuffs. These were not street criminals. These were some of the most powerful figures in world football. Men who had attended black tie galas the night before were now being photographed in front of federal vehicles. The charges were extraordinary: racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering. The United States Department of Justice had been building this case for years. And what they had uncovered was not a simple bribery scandal. It was a financial empire hidden inside the world's most watched sporting organization. The question that morning, and the question that still echoes today, was not whether FIFA had a corruption problem. It was how deep the corruption actually went. Welcome to EnDoc. FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, was founded in Paris in 1904. For most of its early history, it was a modest administrative body. It organized international competitions and set the rules of the game. Revenue was limited, power was limited. That changed in the 1970s and 1980s. Television deals began to transform sport into a global commercial enterprise. Football, with its massive worldwide audience, sat at the center of that transformation. Broadcasting rights became worth billions. And FIFA, as the governing body that owned the rights to the World Cup, suddenly controlled one of the most valuable media properties on Earth. With that money came power. And with that power came a structure that proved almost perfectly designed for abuse. FIFA operated under a governance model that gave extraordinary authority to a small group of officials. Executive committee members held votes on World Cup hosting decisions, broadcasting rights, and commercial contracts. These were decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And there was almost no independent oversight, no external auditors with real authority, no transparency requirements. João Havelange became FIFA president in 1974. He held the position for 24 years. He was succeeded in 1998 by Sepp Blatter, a Swiss administrator who had worked within FIFA for decades. Blatter understood the internal politics of the organization with extraordinary precision. He also understood, according to investigators, how money moved through it. To understand how this system functioned, you need to understand it operated on 3 levels simultaneously. Each level enabled the next. Each one was essential to the whole. Jack Warner served as a vice president of FIFA and as head of CONCACAF, the confederation governing football in North and Central America and the Caribbean. He was, by most accounts, one of the most politically influential figures in the sport. Court documents allege that Warner received tens of millions of dollars in bribes over the course of his career, money directed to him in exchange for votes on broadcasting contracts, hosting bids, and governance decisions. Then there was Chuck Blazer, and Blazer requires a moment of his own. On the surface, Blazer seemed almost comedic. He was a large, bearded American who wore Hawaiian shirts at football banquets. He kept an apartment in Trump Tower in New York. And this is not an invention. He reportedly rented a second apartment in the same building specifically for his cats. But underneath that eccentric exterior was someone who had been operating at the center of football corruption for decades, quietly accumulating wealth while serving as CONCACAF's general secretary alongside Jack Warner. What Blazer did next is what unraveled everything. When the FBI approached him, facing his own charges, he didn't fight. He flipped. Blazer wore a wire at FIFA events. He recorded conversations with officials who believed they were speaking privately. He provided investigators with a detailed map of how money moved through the system. According to court records, he attended the London Olympics in 2012 with a recording device concealed in his key fob. Blazer ultimately pleaded guilty to 10 counts, including racketeering, wire fraud, and tax evasion. He admitted to accepting bribes related to the 1994 and 1998 World Cup hosting votes. He died in 2017 before sentencing, but the evidence he had already provided changed everything. And then there was the deepest villain, one with no single face. FIFA existed for decades in a space largely beyond the reach of ordinary legal and financial accountability, incorporated in Switzerland. Officials who were citizens of multiple countries. Financial flows crossing dozens of jurisdictions. The conditions that allowed this system to function were not accidental. They were the product of specific institutional choices, decisions to concentrate authority in small committees, decisions to resist independent oversight, decisions to treat internal ethics processes as sufficient without external verification. The indictments, unsealed in May 2015, named 47 individuals and organizations. Among them, current and former officials from FIFA, from CONCACAF, from CONMEBOL, the South American Confederation, and from various marketing companies that acted as intermediaries. One of the more significant cooperating witnesses was Alejandro Berzaco, former head of Torneos y Competencia, a major sports marketing company holding rights to South American football competitions. His testimony provided detailed accounts of how bribe payments were structured, routed, and disguised. Payments were rarely made directly. They moved through intermediary companies registered in jurisdictions with limited disclosure requirements. Officials received funds through accounts held in names that obscured their identity. It was, in the words of one federal prosecutor, a system built to be invisible. According to the indictment, the total value of bribes involved exceeded $150 million. That figure, significant as it is, represented only part of the picture. The hosting decisions were perhaps the most consequential element of the entire system, because when FIFA's executive committee voted on where to hold a World Cup, they were not simply choosing a location. They were directing tens of billions of dollars in infrastructure spending, broadcasting revenue, and commercial activity. The decision to award the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar, announced simultaneously in December 2010, was immediately controversial. Qatar was a small Gulf state with extreme summer heat, no football tradition of note, and a population far too small to fill stadiums under normal conditions. Independent analysts had rated other bids more highly on technical grounds. FIFA commissioned an independent investigation, led by American lawyer Michael Garcia. The Garcia report ran to more than 400 pages. But, in a decision that drew fierce criticism, FIFA released only a summary prepared by its own adjudicatory chamber chief. Garcia publicly stated that the summary misrepresented his findings. He resigned in protest. The full report was not released publicly until 2017. Even then, significant portions were redacted. Now hold that history in your mind, and consider this single number: $11 billion. Projected revenues from the 2026 World Cup: $11 billion. That is the projected total commercial revenue broadcasting deals, sponsorship, licensing from the 2026 World Cup, hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. To put that in context, the total bribes documented across the entire FIFA corruption investigation amounted to approximately $150 million. The 2026 World Cup alone is projected to generate more than 70 times that amount in a single tournament. With this much money on the table more than at any point in football history, the real question is not whether the old system existed. The question is whether something fundamentally different has replaced it, or whether the corruption has simply evolved to match the scale. FIFA announced in 2018 that the 2026 World Cup would be jointly hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The United bid received 61 votes. A rival bid from Morocco received 23. The process was widely described as more transparent than previous hosting selections. But transparent processes and clean processes are not identical, and the same financial incentives that made the old system so durable have not disappeared. They have grown. Gianni Infantino was elected FIFA president in February 2016. He campaigned on transparency, reform, and rebuilding trust. Under Infantino, FIFA introduced new governance measures, term limits, enhanced financial disclosures, an independent audit committee, reforms to the ethics committee structure. These changes were real in procedural terms. Whether they were sufficient to address the systemic conditions that had enabled decades of corruption was a question that many observers answered with significant skepticism. Infantino himself became a subject of scrutiny. Swiss prosecutors opened an investigation into a series of private meetings between Infantino and the Swiss Attorney General overseeing FIFA-related cases. The meetings were not disclosed at the time they occurred. Infantino denied any wrongdoing. Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini, who had been banned from football following the undisclosed payment controversy, were charged with fraud by Swiss prosecutors and tried in 2023. Both were acquitted on the fraud charges by the Swiss Federal Criminal Court, though the court noted that certain financial arrangements had not been properly documented. What the FIFA corruption investigation ultimately revealed was not simply a story about dishonest individuals. The individuals mattered, their choices mattered, but the deeper story was about structure. The victims of this system were diffuse but real. Development funds meant for grassroots football in poorer nations were redirected. Hosting decisions that should have reflected sporting merit were distorted. Tournaments were built in places chosen partly because those choices generated private payments for private individuals. The sport itself was used as a vehicle for personal enrichment. The system that allowed billions to be extracted from the world's most popular sport was not built overnight. It was constructed gradually, across decades, through small accommodations and quiet arrangements that each seemed manageable in isolation. And it was maintained not only by the officials who participated in it, but by the broader ecosystem sponsors, broadcasters, governments that found it convenient not to look too closely. The 2026 World Cup is approaching. The money involved is larger than ever. The reforms are real, but incomplete. Dozens have been convicted, but several cases remain unresolved. And some of the most significant questions, particularly around the hosting decisions of 2010, remain formally open. The question that persisted after every arrest, every indictment, every guilty plea still hangs in the air. When the stakes are this high and the oversight is still imperfect, how confident can anyone be that the lesson was truly learned?